they were very quick to come up with a tool with which to transfer an Access web app directly into a Zoho Creator app. Now, it can only obviously really import the data, and that's really it, the data, the structure, but along the way it creates forms and reports to go with that data. So I thought what I'd do is to show you a very simple Access web app here. Should all have seen something like this or built things like this yourselves. This is actually an app that I built about 2 years ago for a series of blog articles that I produced and an ebook, which were published on the European SharePoint website. So, it's a relatively simple little app, sort of contact manager type thing, base CRM or whatever, with activities and so on. So I don't know if you're all aware of how you can make an Access Web Apps database accessible externally. So on the File menu, you can go to Manage Connections. Let's close that for a second. Turn on Read Write or read-only external access, and then go to this screen, which gives you all of the database connection information that you'll need to provide external access to your database. So if we go back to the browser, I have the page open where I can click to migrate an Access web app directly into Zoho Creator. So just bear with me while I copy these over. One thing I liked very much about what Zoho did here is that all of the connections string fields are in the same order. So it's all very obvious how to do this. Contrary actually to Microsoft, the way they, for example, would need you to build a connection string for yourself if you wanted to connect Power BI to the database, for example. Oops, where's that? Oh, lost it. Oops, I do apologize for that. Okay, so I do apologize for turning that video on by accident. So if you want to, we've now kind of connected our database, and it's giving us details of the tables, how they're related to each other, and the fact there are a couple of other tables down here we can ignore for the time being. And you can look at that in a number of ways, either as a diagram or here in a tabular format. Now I'm going to turn off the import of the ID field here because I don't need it in Zoho. Only really interested in those two tables at the moment. And I click on Create. Oh, I can't do it because it's already there. Okay, not to worry. I think you get the idea. I had forgotten to delete it. So this is what would have been created. So well, I have added something which I'll come on to in a minute. So this is the running version of a very, very simple Zoho Creator application. And we've got here contacts with a kind of report view, which lets you view records in a number of ways, edit them, So and so forth. Any questions so far?
Yeah, one question, Julian, really
Sorry,
quickly. It looked like you imported these tables with their relationships intact. Is that correct?
it is indeed. Yep.
So this is in fact a relational database.
It is indeed. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
There are a number of different ways to build screens and things. You probably noticed in here that I've got related subform on, rather unformatted and so on yet, but you can have subforms on your forms as you can in Access, or you can do things like create buttons which will load, in this case, a pop-up. So that's a little bit similar to using a related items control, I suppose, in AWA, and then you can click on through there to edit the records and so on. So there are a number of options to you. I'll show you how that button's put together a little later on. So yeah, so it's created a number of things for me, and I've just added that button since I transfer the data, deleted a load of fields from this view, some of which you can see there hidden, and done some things like created a graph, very exciting graph, which shows how many sort of client activities there have been each month within that very small set of data. I mean, this graph, for example, is a couple of minutes in the making, and it will include features to, turn on and off different types of activity in this case, and to change the type of graph and all that kind of stuff. So there are lots of features that come as standard for end users as well, even being able to export graph, the data, etc. So now I'm in this view. Users also have options over how they want to actually see an app. If they prefer to have their menu down the side, they can. If they like to have, colors, whatever, all sorts of things. So there are lots of different themes, there are lots of different styles you can use, and so on. Go back to the way it was to start with.
So those are configurable by the end user?
Yep.
Can you control what they have access to?
Yes. You can also, it also has security features built in, which means that, if a certain user doesn't have access to activities, for example, then the menu won't appear, or the options that relate to that data won't appear. So unlike in Access Web Apps, where, for example, you'd have to put a bit of macro code in a view or form, say, do you have access to this, and if not, maybe go somewhere else. You wouldn't be able to take it off the menu. In here, it will just go from the menu and so on. So let's take a look at this in design view. I think, no, that's the wrong one. In design view. That's in a new tab. Now, one of the nice things there is it opens the particular object that you were looking at in design view, rather than just at the sort of starting point for the application. So here I can see the particular graph that I was looking at, and I can change it if I want to, or put some filters on it, or whatever. So I could filter, for example. Oh, I've got something happening a bit slowly here. I'll just refresh the screen. Bear with me. Yeah. I could filter it, for example, so I could say that I only want, I don't know, meetings and phone calls on my graph. Save that. Refresh this, assuming that's actually saved now. Yep. So the other activity type is gone. Okay. So there's quite a sort of dynamic relationship between the design environment and the actual app. There are lots of other things you can do. For example, if we look at the report, which showed me my list of contacts, you can define what columns appear on it, any sorting or grouping. I haven't sorted it, but I might sort it by contact name. I might group it by company if this was if I had some sensible real data, or filter it or whatever. I can restrict visibility so that users are limited in what they can do with the data that they see. I can choose which groups of users in various ways, whether it's via roles and so on, have access to this view, or whether it's all users, or only me because it's an admin report and so on, and then what they can do from there. Can they add a record? Can they delete one? Can they edit it, etc.? Can they export the data and so on? So you've got quite granular control over what people can do. And you've also got something called custom actions, and this lets you create a button basically, which will either appear as this one does for each record, an inline button, or is displayed as in the menu header, in the menu on the header, or whatever. So this particular one shows for each record, and it runs, if you click that button, a function called Open Activities, which I can edit. And you'll see that it's basically just a little bit of code that opens another view called Activities View for a particular contact. So it's a view of the contact of the activities records for the contact that you're looking at and opens in a pop-up window. So that's the first bit of what's called deluge code that that I'm going to show you, and you know, it's quite a sort of JavaScript-like language, and all of the commands that are relevant to where you are in the, or what type of function or script you're writing, are available to you on the left-hand side. So if you want to fetch records from the database, if you want to add records to the database, if you want to update records, or if you want to, you know, loop through them and so on, all available down here. And for those of you sort of who might have questions, there are facilities to integrate with APIs and things through the sort of web data items at the bottom. So quite a lot of functionality in the language. Okay, so it's probably worth moving on from this very simple little app to something a bit more sophisticated. So this is your kind of Zoho Creator home screen. Contacts is the one that we were just looking at. But I've started work on an HR app, which has a lot more data in it. We've got quite a few types of data in here. Within Zoho Creator, you create forms, and that creates a table at the same time. You can have what they call stateless forms that aren't related directly to the underlying data, but as a general rule, forms and data are kind of one and the same thing. And when you create a form, it also creates a report, which is really used for navigation, and you can also you can create other types of reports that are used for, you know, graphs or charts or calendars or what have you. So this is a human resources app. So let's just have a look at what it does. So here we've got, you know, a list of all our employees. I've got a grouped report in this case. They're grouped by department, and I can edit those records from here. I can view details in a formatted way if I want, and you've got quite a lot of control about how those displays work. I can see what leave this person's had, and again I can go in and edit these or view details of each of those records as well, and so on. But I also have a menu of other custom, what are called custom actions, that are available to deal with for whichever record or records you select from the list. So I might want to see this particular person's leave statistics. Here I've got their 2018, 2017, and 2016 leave stats showing all of their entitlements and how many days remaining they've got and all that kind of thing. So again, you've got quite a lot of control over, what you do where. Oops. Okay. I've also got some examples of charts and bits and pieces in here. We've seen some of those. And another type of report that you can build is a calendar. And this is a standard feature in Zoho Creator, and I can see, for example, details of these records by clicking on it. I can edit it. If I want to change something, what the time period of that leave is or whatever, then that's fully okay, and I can go straight to edit from here as well. So if I want to make that up until the 12th of June instead of the, whoops. Update it. And in the background now, that's running a script which will actually recalculate the leave entitlement or leave remaining totals and all that kind of thing. So you have, similar to Microsoft Access, you have events that trigger when records are saved, and kind of validation events, and also field level events when they're updated or edited and that kind of thing. So quite a lot of capability there. I've also built in some features in here which allow an employee to, for example, see their own leave calendar. I don't think there are any records for me at the moment. Yes, there is one there. Okay, and so on. And depending on the access rights of the person, they may only see that menu. So and that's all handled through the security, and I'll show you some of that in a minute. Okay. So if you want to create something new, you can create a new form, a new report, a new page. A page is essentially an HTML page which you can aggregate a number of other things on. So if we go into here, there's a leave dashboard that I've been working on, which shows across the top how many employees are in the organization, how many sick days there have been in the last year, how many people are absent today, and how many leave requests are outstanding. And then there are a couple of embedded reports on the page as well. So if we come in through here, leave dashboard, you'll see we've got a calendar embedded in there. We've got a report showing absences by month, and a sickness cost by month, which takes the number of sick days, multiplies it by the person's daily rate, and shows you a total cost. So again, these are relatively straightforward to build. This is actually a beta version of a new page builder. The standard ones actually you kind of write it in HTML, but I've got this version, and it's heading in the right direction, shall we say, and you can see what it's going to look like on a mobile device and so forth. So, okay, let's go back to the dashboard again. Okay, so any questions so far?
I have a few. First of all, when you're creating your data, being used to being more, oops, sorry about that.
That's right.
Whoops.
Who is that?
I'm on the phone. I'm on my webinar. Okay, got rid of that. Used to creating tables like through, its own separate GUI. Creating forms, I mean, I'm unsure, but I'm sure there's ways to create relationships between the forms.
Yep.
Okay. And then views.
Okay. There are some things that you as Access folk, you probably won't like very much.
Oh, okay.
but I'm finding I'm getting used to it. So if we go into one of the forms, hang on, bear with it for a second. I think my connection's actually struggling with online meetings sometimes, and web access at the same time. So if you look here, this is a special kind of field. This is actually done in a very similar way to in Access Web Apps, because this is a lookup field. Okay, so it has defined the relationship to the employee record, and you can then pick which field from the employee record you want to have in your drop down and you want to have displayed in the resulting field. So we go in here, we go into absences, and probably go there, I think. And if I add an absence, I can pick an employee, right? And I created a calculated field in the employee record, which shows their name, a hyphen, and their job title. So I can create a new leave record for that person. Maybe they're off sick today. It's the 20th with you, of course, but it's 12:37. It's 0:37 here. Off sick. Submit it. Okay, so that's created that record, and it's related it to the employee. So if we go on to the employee view, and who was? Oh, good. Can you remember which employee it was? I think it was Patricia, was it? I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. Okay, I believe you. I mean, I figured there was a way to do that.
Yeah.
And and do you find the need to create views? Is there a way to do that?
Not in the way that you are used to.
Okay.
You've got if we look at a report first of all. Let's say my details, because it's nice and simple. So this is a report with a filter. Okay. Sorry, with a filter down here, where work email address is equal to the login user ID of the person who is logged in. So the assumption there is that we're holding the user email, the email address of them as a user within their Zoho sort of record, if you like, their employee record. And you can add additional filters and things on here for filtering what you might call reports, and the same would go for graphs or for calendars and so on. So you have reasonably sophisticated filtering controls here with subgroups and things which enable you to do, ORs and stuff. So all is not totally as you expect, but I found I can get there. Additionally, you're able to do with the language. A lot of stuff. I'm going to show you some stuff that I was probably a bit more than I was intending to. If I go down here, is that a good one? Probably a reasonable one. This is a bit of code that takes the absence kind of header record, which has got start date, end date, type, and stuff like that, and it looks up the person's working pattern, it looks up their leave rules, it looks up through, it loops through and checks any public holidays, and then works out how many of the days are actually leave days and creates a day record for each of the days. So it's going through a lot of data. So if we take a look at an example of that, here, this line here is taking the absence record, taking the employee ID that's been entered against that absence, and looking up the employee record, and putting the whole employee record, in this case, in a variable called the employee. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So are you with me? So the
Yes.
employee is just a variable I've called to identify that particular person. If I wanted to, I could write a piece of code that said, look for a particular field in oops, excuse me, I've got a bit of a problem with my music again. I don't know why that's doing that. Right, this time. Okay, which lets me look at all the fields. And if I wanted to assign the value from a particular field to a variable, I can then extend that statement to include the particular field.
Okay, so basically, you've been able to overcome, you've been able to design your data so that it's linked together like you would in any traditional database, and you're able to join things together and show things together simply through the form builders or by the addition of some background code.
Yep. But
okay.
the form builder and the form builder really is building the data at the same time as it builds the form.
Right.
I did have this discussion with someone from Zoho a little while ago, whether I like that or not. And I'm obviously from the Access camp, and I possibly would prefer to be able to design my data and the relationships separately. AWA was kind of halfway between the two, because you design the relationships. It creates a form at the same time, obviously.
Right.
But so it's I don't know.
It's just different.
It's just different.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think you can create stuff and you can report on it, and these commands to look up data and assign them to variables are very sophisticated. They can include sets of data. For example, public holidays is a set of data which includes all public holidays. And you can loop through that.
Okay, no, it looks good.
Yeah.
And and just a couple of other just high-level questions. I don't need you to go through examples. I assume that the data is properly protected for multiple users that uses some kind of locking, or do you have to build that yourself?
I'm making that assumption. I haven't come across any problems so far. If there's any, there may be somebody from Zoho listening in. If there is, maybe they could answer that question. There?
Is there anyone from Zoho participating?
They were threatening to.
Yeah. Hi, this is Akshya.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, can you just repeat the question?
If you're in a multiple user environment and you have two different users and they try to access the same, in this instance, the same employee, and they both make changes, do you protect the records, or do you tell the user who does the update first? Do you tell the second user that the data has been changed at all? It's kind of
Yes,
like a locking or a.
yes, and all of this is possible at various levels. For example, just take some example. If you have a report and you want to, a particular user is logging in to an app, and what you can do is you can simply ask the report to show only the records he has added. Okay, so using an option that Julian has already, shown you, called the criteria, you can simply set all of these are possible at various levels. In the form, you can actually, again, in the background, set permissions as to who can view a particular field or who cannot view a particular field. And similarly, there's an option called restrict visibility. Am I audible? Is it okay? Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And in the report, similarly, there's an option called restrict visibility, and where you can simply restrict who views what. And like you asked, if there is an update given to another user, we have an option called record audit, which is available in one of the higher plans. But then the admin can view all of the records that have been added and who has added it and who has edited it at what time and when, etc. So that is does that answer your question?
No, and I guess I can give you a better example. My example wasn't too good. Okay, let's say we have employee 1 and two different users call up employee 1. And the first user changes employee 1's telephone number and saves the data. So saves the record back. Now that record is different in the database than what's on the screen for user 2. Now user 2 still shows the old telephone number, and user 2 goes in there and changes the address for that employee. Now when that second user saves down that record, unless the system stops them, the record will be saved and the telephone number will now be set back to what the old telephone number was.
Yes.
In typical systems on the web, what would happen is when that second user tried to save, it would tell the user that record has been changed by some other user, and it wouldn't allow them to save it. It would have them refresh it and re-enter, whatever their changes are.
Yes, when dynamically, I think I'm not exactly. Yeah, this might be a situation. I mean, I would get back to you with this question. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that would be really important. I think, this is George again. I'm going to jump in and say, I think coming out of this initial introductory session, a lot of us who are listening are going to have more follow-up questions. And so we'll have to come up with a mechanism to collect those and pass them back to you.
Yes.
Because, go ahead.
Yeah, I could forward you my email address right now, and you could, if Julian can, and any of you can email.
Okay, that would be good. This way I could, really lay out what the question is. So
yes, absolutely. I get it. You're talking about simultaneous, I get it. I get the question, but I think, I would get back to you with the answer, yes.
And that kind of thing, yeah. Okay, Before, I don't want to go very much further because we're at 50 minutes or so far, but there are a couple of other things I wanted to talk about briefly. First of all, I mentioned sort of permissions and users and so forth. There's a lot of capability here to control who sees what, down to field level if you want to. So I can say, here, for example, I mentioned that there will be some users in HR system who may only be able to see certain things, and you can see here an example of how that would be configured. I've got lots of features that are not ticked for those users, and some that are. And you can even do field level permissions if you want to.
And this is default standard behavior for Zoho.
Yeah, it depends on your plan, how many of these features you have, but if you have the sort of typical plan, you probably have most of these features. But what's included in what plan is fairly well explained on their sort of pricing page. Okay. I haven't investigated what translation does yet, but I assume it does something. Some stuff which I'm really not aware of. There's a live chat feature that you can enable with your apps so users can chat, and there is a sort of a sections feature with which you can organize your menus as well. So you can show and hide each of these sections, etc. And I've got a whole load of stuff that's hidden at the bottom that doesn't appear on any of the menus. So again, you can move stuff about very easily. And so on. And then you've got your sharing options, who you want to be able to see this app, who you want to invite to use this app. You can manage users, manage groups of users, and so forth. So there's quite a lot of kind of good admin story there in terms of securing your apps and so forth. So that's that. I also wanted to look at a couple of other things. You can create schedules which can be sort of run on a timed basis. So, for example, I've got an example here where I'm going to send an email if an appraisal is overdue. So I'm taking the form performance reviews and the field target date on performance reviews, and after 1 day past that, I am then going to send an email, which is in this case constructed in the Deluge scripting language again. So I'm looking up the employee concerned, I'm creating an email, and also sending an email to the manager or the approver or the appraiser, if you like, to tell them that it's overdue as well. So there's the capability of doing sort of timed events, which would always been something that I longed to be able to do in Access Web Apps. I think when you get into the web environment in particular, you really are going to be looked to build workflows quite a regular basis. I mentioned different kinds of events that happen on forms and on controls on forms. So you have on-load events, for example, on forms. If we go to the employee form, I wanted to disable a couple of the fields and hide one field. So I've disabled these three fields because they are calculated in Deluge scripts. And then I've got an on success script, which goes through and calculates some of that stuff actually. And sets up their leave entitlement if they haven't got any. So if you added a new employee, it creates that for them. And there are similar things happening on edit success as opposed to new record select success. You can have scripts that run when you delete records. So I'm deleting here, I'm deleting related data from related tables. It doesn't have cascade delete as part of its relationship capabilities, unfortunately. And you can have scripts that happen, when fields are updated or whatever. Okay. So, in terms of the script builder itself, you have two options as well. You have this sort of kind of normal coding window, which has got IntelliSense and all that kind of thing. But you also have something called the script builder, which you can drag a kind of a command onto the work surface, and you then have this sort of idiot-proof, if you like, screen with which to build that particular statement. I use a bit of a combination of both. I find, for example, if I'm creating emails and things, that the script builder is very useful at building sort of HTML emails and so forth. And for most of the rest of the time, I use the normal sort of code window. But so you have a choice. There are sort of various debug features and so on as well. So anything else that anyone wants to ask me?
I know, I'm back again.
That's all right. I like people that ask questions.
Yeah. On the store, we were interested in, moving to a platform that had a store. The store doesn't seem to have much in it at all. I mean, is it being actively searched, or is there any kind of statistics that are on there?
Something for the Zoho representative here, but I think it's very new. I mean, there's an old store that seems to have a lot of not very good stuff in it. And I think they've made a choice to go to a completely new marketplace, and it's early days.
Okay.
So, I can't answer it yet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Absolutely. It is early days, actually. We've recently revamped our entire marketplace and the whole thing, actually. So if you would like some statistics on how it's doing and everything, I would be happy to forward it to you. So like I said, if you're able to send a list of all your questions, it would be great.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Listen,
Okay.
can I jump in here really quickly? A couple of like housekeeping things. I'm going to mispronounce your name. It's Akshaya?
Yes.
Akshaya.
Yes.
Can you put an email address into the chat window so that we can follow up with you?
Absolutely. Just a moment.
Yeah. And the other thing I just wanted to we kind of did this a little bit backwards because I know Julian has other things that he needs to be doing, so we dived right into the presentation without doing the introduction or background. So I'll give it back to Julian to kind of wrap up, and then if there are any other things we want to talk about, we can do that and let him get on about his business.
Yeah, thanks for that, George. I think I would like to say one thing actually about Zoho as a company. I've actually found them to be much more forthcoming in many ways than I'm used to. For example, I don't think Microsoft would ever have agreed to provide any statistics about how their stores are doing. I just don't think that would ever have happened. I certainly asked and never got an answer. And I found them to be extremely helpful in all sorts of ways so far. And that's been quite refreshing. I mean, obviously, some of us here are Access MVPs, but I think I can honestly say I've had more open discussions, even in the last sort of 2 or 3 months, with Zoho people than maybe I ever did with the Access team, and I think that's quite interesting. I've mentioned some things that I think could be better, and you know, I've had positive responses, which is good. So thanks very much, actually, for that. It makes it much easier to do business, really. The other thing I'd say, if you are thinking of going into this with a sort of a consultancy viewpoint, or you know, using it to provide stuff for clients, the certified developer stroke certified solution provider sort of program is quite good. We get emails most days with 3, 4, 5 different projects that have been kind of requested on their website, and you know, you can apply for them. Admittedly, quite a few people apply for them, but you know, that's where my 2 projects so far have come from. And you know, that's you know, that gives you a bit of a start with some you know, potential clients. So that's been good. So I guess that's about all I have to say at the moment. If anyone wants to contact me as well, feel free. Shall I put my email in the
Yes,
chat?
please do. I am recording this session, so this will be available on the Access Web App User Group site as a recording. I'm not quite sure how that's done because Lucy normally does it, but I will figure out how to make that happen. And I see another question coming in, or a comment.
Well, it was me. I was hoping to be able to see again from the view, just the big, you know, trying to get the big picture of how it all fits together. You know, do you have a view in Zoho of the tables or the forms or where your data is set? But you've already gone away from the screen, so.
Oh, shall I go back?
If it's possible.
I think I have to, yeah, share.
I know the coding will come in the future, but I'm still trying to get like the big picture of how the large chunks of pieces are going to fit together, the forms and the tables.
Okay. I mean, basically, a form and a table are one and the same thing, which is weird, but that's, you know, for us, because we're used to it being different. So if we go to, say, this table here, employee leave entitlements, that's a table that is related to the employee, and it's related to the employee by doing that, creating a lookup, adding a lookup field to the quote form, and then saying, you know, what it's connected to. So if I actually put one on.
Can you not have more than one form connected with the same set of data?
No, you can't. It's an interesting question, because you can't have a kind of bound form that is connected to the same set of data. But you can have what are called stateless forms, I think is the correct term, which you use Deluge script to populate and to update data with. So it's not really too difficult to do, but it's, you know, like an unbound access form would be.
Okay.
And you use their script to change the data source in effect.
Yeah. But having said that, it's quite straightforward to display or hide things on forms either through security or through Deluge script. So if I wanted some of these fields to disappear for certain users, then that would be quite easy to do. I have some examples, but to be honest, I can't remember which ones they are, where loads of stuff disappears and reappears. For example, I mean, one of the things that we always wanted in Access Web Apps was, you know, if you filled in a certain option in a particular field, then, you know, a section of the screen might hide or display depending on it. That would be quite easy to do in here with the Deluge script. So you just have an on change kind of event which would hide or display things depending on choice. I did that with a client recently. It was doing kind of performance evaluations of trainers in a gym and all things, and if they were evaluating a trainee, then they got different fields further down the screen than
skip logic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very easy to do. In AWA, it's impossible. Obviously, in Access Forms, quite straightforward to do. Within this, though, the gaps close up and things like that.
Where would you go to see the list of all the forms that you have? The list of forms, list of tables is the same thing.
Yeah, in your dashboard here.
Okay, so that's the list of all your data sources now.
Yep.
Okay.
And you could also see them, a quick way of accessing them through here as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And again,
hey, Julian.
Yep.
Hey, it's Kevin here. Maybe I missed it, but when you were importing your data, it looked like it created a field for your image type, but I didn't see an image come over. Does it bring over images?
It doesn't at the moment, Kevin. I only realized that actually a couple of days ago. It doesn't seem to import the images. I guess that's because they're in, the AWA stores them in a different table, doesn't it? And it's
it used to be stored in the same table, and then they put an update out at some place where it actually put it in a separate table, but it's a related table. And it's a one-to-one. They just did it for performance.
Yeah, I know. Something I might mention, or if our friend from Zoho could take a note of that, maybe it would be worth doing that. I mean, the only one I've converted that's a live database, fortunately, we only had 2 images in it anyway, so it didn't really matter very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be a problem.
Yeah, I've got like 5,000 images, so.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be doing that, no.
No.
That would be extremely difficult. I have one other question, and it has to do with what you were just discussing. So right now, one of the advantages of the AWA is the ability to create a hybrid. And that does not appear to be something that this will support?
Not in the same way, no, because it's all in the cloud. But I think one of the main reasons that you want a hybrid is, well, the 2 reasons I can really think of. One is reporting, and the second is perhaps better coding capabilities that you get in VBA compared to AWA macros. I would suggest that with this, you've got a language that is a bit more akin to what you can do in VBA. Obviously, it's not going to have the same kind of any of the features that come from it being a Windows application, but it does have capabilities to link to third-party APIs and that kind of stuff. So it kind of includes the web equivalent. So I don't know. I think that issue is a non-issue, George. I think if you then add the fact that you've got, I obviously can't show on here the apps running in a mobile environment, but you get a mobile app as well that works pretty well. It's not perfect yet, but it works pretty well on a mobile device, phone or tablet, Android or iOS. Then I think that's quite a big benefit. AWAs really stink on a mobile device, as I'm sure anyone who's tried has found out.
Okay. I think one of the use cases that I have seen is a mobile piece that it's basically a login form, sign in for shift work, where people show up and sign in that, yeah, I'm here now. And that would be possible just to present on the mobile device just that subset of the entire application for the mobile.
Are there any queries? The reason I would use a hybrid is because I do a lot of analysis and crunching of the numbers and data. Are there any queries in Zoho?
Not in the way that you're used to them as a separate thing, but if you were watching earlier when I was showing filters for reports.
Filters.
So filters for reports are reasonably good. You also have the sort of in the code you have the ability to create. Hang on, let's get a sensible example. To look up data. So here I'm looking up the employee based on again a criteria here that the employee's ID is equal to the variable I've got called the N, which is a terminology I use for that at the moment, and so forth. So you can assign single records, single field values, or sets of records to variables. And if you've got a set of records and a variable, you're then able to do stuff with those records. For example, loop through them with a for each record. So you can loop through records directly in a table, or you could loop through the values in an array or a sort of set record, if you like. So you've got quite a lot there to do, but you don't have that really nice Access query builder, and you certainly don't have the sort of update queries and stuff that you have in Access Desktop that I've almost forgotten about, having been doing AWA for so many years. But yeah, I found I can do stuff.
So you're using basically the script instead of SQL to do stuff.
Yeah.
And it is returning record sets.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate statement?
I think so. Yeah, I guess that. Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, exactly.
So you can set a record set to a variable and then work with that variable as a record set.
Yep. If you remember the code example I gave you earlier, I was looking at all of the records, assigning them to a variable, and then looping through them. So yeah, I mean, yes, you can.
Okay. Well, again, I want to be sensitive to Julian's time. I think it's well past midnight for him. So if there are any other questions, let's squeeze them in, and then thank him profusely for his really strong commitment, and appreciate it. And
really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's all right.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian.
Yeah.
It's all right. Let's see whether there are any questions on here. All right. So from me, I guess that's all I have to say at the moment, unless there are any more questions before we finish.
Well, I'm thinking at some point we would like to revisit this. I think really quickly next month we have scheduled, I believe, George Young in Denver, who is going to talk to us about his approach to .NET development and Access. I have to finalize the details of his presentation. So in July, that will be our next kind of alternative that we'll look at. But I think down the road, Can I just have a vote here? Who else would like to have a revisit of this particular subject? Not getting a lot of response, so maybe we'll.
I'd like to see have another session on it down the road. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely would, because now that we've had the introduction, I think it's going to be easier to formulate questions.
Yes,
Yep.
very much so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, so.
I'm quite happy to participate in that. Obviously, I'm getting to know it better by the day, and hopefully within a few months I'll have a bit more of my app done. See some more work. I didn't show, for example, doing workflows with it and things like that, all of which seems to work quite well. So yeah, I'm more than happy to.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't want to kind of like focus in on this one alternative to the exclusion of others, but I think there's enough here that we can profitably revisit it. So on that note, are there any other comments, questions, suggestions about where we go next? Like I say, my plan for next month is sort of the .NET angle, and after that, whatever is next. So please feel free to give me suggestions for other tools that you'd like to look at as part of our group discussion. Okay, on that note then, I guess unless there's other comments, we can call it a day. Thank you again very much, Julia and Akshay, everybody, for joining us. We had a pretty good presentation here, pretty good group of people. Look forward to giving you more details on the next presentation and seeing you in July.